29 years of waiting has led to this moment. For the first time ever in program history, the Quinnipiac men's ice hockey team are the national champions. Last night, they took down Minnesota in an iconic 3-2 overtime victory in Amalie Arena. We'll break it all down for you right now on the Q30 post-game report. Hi everybody, Clever Streich, David Marr here in the media suite, Studio 125 for the post-game report after Quinnipiac and Minnesota collided in the NCAA National Championship game last night. The Bobcats taking the game 3-2. David, what were some of your immediate reactions as the Bobcats took home their first ever national title?
Well, Quinnipiac did a great job adjusting in the second period. We heard it from Rand Pecknold after the game. They were well-conditioned, and I feel like at that point they outskated Minnesota. You had your fear going into the game that Quinnipiac could be outskated in the game, and that would be one of the reasons why they would lose. Well, they adjusted from there, and you could see the shots start to pile up. It felt like the pressure just caved in on Minnesota. They couldn't hold the fort down for that long, and ultimately Quinnipiac, well-conditioned, made adjustments in the second period, and ultimately wore the Gophers down and ultimately came home with the hardware.
So after those immediate reactions, let's take a look now at the highlights from the national championship game between the Bobcats and the Golden Gophers. Roll it. Quinnipiac, Minnesota, national title, all the marbles. Let's get into it. The Bobcats entering the arena on the carpet, taking in all the sights and sounds in Tampa Bay.
Now let's jump right into the first period, Clever. Minnesota getting on the board. A poor turnover by Jaden Lee. Going to give up the puck, and here comes Middlestat racing in. Around the net it goes, and he fires in the rebound. Minnesota takes the early 1-0 lead 5 minutes into the first period.
Yeah, John Middlestat with the first tally. The Minnesota Golden Gophers follow up in the second. Shot off the end boards, ricochets, and then Jackson Nelson putting it home. Golden Gophers up 2-0 in the second period. Flashing over to the end of the second, the Bobcats get one back. Christophe Tellier on the doorstep off a feed from Zach Metza.
Zach Metza with a beautiful pass set up that goal. Let's go to the third period. Bobcats, time winding down. Power play comes to an end. But you know what doesn't come to an end? The Bobcats come back as Colin Graff finds the back of the net, and we are tied at 2 in Tampa Bay.
It's the stuff dreams are made of. 2:47 to go. Graff with pay dirt, heading to overtime. All on the line. Bobcats win the draw. Metza in his own defensive end. Long pass up to Lipkin. Backhander. And oh my goodness, Jacob Quillen with the goal to send the Bobcats into the national championship. They win it all in Tampa Bay. They take the title back to Hamden. You see it right there as they have it. Now let's break down that goal from Jacob Quillen, the biggest goal in Quinnipiac program history. David, take us through how the Bobcats scored the overtime finish.
Well, it's off a set face-off by the Bobcats. A clean win on the draw for Jacob Quillen. Now the pass from Zach Metza, but Sam Lipkin comes from the left side of the red line and goes all the way to the near side. What a sweet pass across the ice on the 2-on-1. Jacob Quillen almost loses this puck initially, but able to recollect it, deposits it into the back of the net, and that is all she wrote in Tampa. The Bobcats exercise their overtime demons in OT against Minnesota with a final of 3-2. Jacob Quillen, a tremendous performance for Quinnipiac. 3 goals in the last 2 games against Michigan and Minnesota, including the one that will last a lifetime here in Quinnipiac.
Yeah, it was huge. And what was the greatest part of that play is that Joe Dumais set that up on the bench. That was a set play that they ran. The Minnesota Golden Gophers got caught right off the face-off. Metza, long north-south pass all the way up to Lipkin, the backhander, and then Quillen taking it home. The York Hill boys, Colin Graff, Sam Lipkin, Jacob Quillen, each getting on the score sheet. What a night for the Bobcats. I mean, this was an incredible game, one of the most iconic games in college hockey history. What were your 3 stars, David, would you say, from this game and from the wider season for the Bobcats?
Well, for this game specifically, I'll start off with Zach Metza. I think Metza with 3 assists on the day, 3 helpers, a big part of the reason the captain of this team obviously did a lot to get the Bobcats the win. My second star, got to be with the guy that showed up all season on offense, and that's Colin Graff. Big goal to tie the game up for Quinnipiac. And then, of course, the number 1 star has got to be Jacob Quillen. I mean, that goal at the end of the game, what dreams are made of, as you said, Clever, but that is a big-time goal for Quinnipiac. He has just been an absolute horse for the Bobcats in the tournament. He has scored a ton of goals in the postseason, 3 goals the last 2 games, 2 against Michigan, the game winner against Minnesota. He's definitely my number 1 star. Now for the season, I'll start off number 3, the backbone, the life of this team. Yaniv Peretz had a tremendous season once again, and under 2 goals against average in between the pipes for Quinnipiac, and a .934 save percentage on the season. Now for the second star, it's going to be Sam Lipkin. Lipkin had an outstanding freshman campaign. He really turned it on after that Yale game in November when he had 4 points for Quinnipiac, ultimately leading him to get Rookie of the Week in that week in the ECAC. And then number 1's got to be Colin Graff. He put up 50 points this season. We haven't seen a Bobcat do that since Sam Anis back in 2015 for Quinnipiac when they went on their last national championship run, which ultimately fell short. But at the end of the day, those are my 3 stars for the season for the Bobcats.
They exercised the Demons 7 years later in the same venue. I have to agree with all those picks. Some great stars of the game and stars of the season, David. My next question for you, how did Rand Pecknold build this team? Only 3 NHL prospects on this roster. Like you mentioned, Sam Lipkin, an Arizona Coyotes 7th-round draft pick, Skylar Brindamore, a 6th-round draft pick of the Oilers, and then Chase Clark, who didn't play in the game, but he's a Washington Capitals goaltending draft pick, against a real bunch of NHL caliber talent, NHL prospect caliber talent like Logan Cooley and Knives. How did they come through with this win, and how did Rand Pecknold build this team to be championship caliber?
He had a really big culture when he came into Quinnipiac. His culture was arguably the difference throughout this entire tournament. We know that going up against the Big Ten is going to be a challenge. They had NHL caliber talent, big guys at forwards, especially Ohio State, who I thought was the biggest team coming into the tournament size-wise. And then you're dealing with 2 of the most stacked rosters in the country with Michigan and then Minnesota. But the culture he brought in, you got to think about where this team started from the ground up. They were a Division II program in a high school hockey rink that was basically had to be rented out for this team to play in. Starting from there and then building the program up to a couple national championship runs, a couple ECAC Cups in the span for Rand Pecknold and the Bobcats. Obviously, they didn't get that this year, but Colgate can have the ECAC championship. The Bobcats national championship won't get taken away from them. It is a huge accomplishment for Rand Pecknold. 29 years and 600-plus wins later, he can now officially say that he is a national championship winning coach. But it's not just him. Joe Dumais has done an incredible job. He took over behind the bench for the Holy Cross game for Quinnipiac back in December. And Mike Corbett has done a tremendous job as well as the assistant coach. But everybody on the coaching staff, including Rand Pecknold, deserves a lot of credit for getting this team to where they are right now.
Rand Pecknold was paid less than $7,000 when he was taking over this program in 1994. In order to make ends meet, he taught history on the side. He taught high school history. And now he is history.
Absolutely. And again, no better way to go out. I mean, you're playing against 3 of the best teams in the country. Ohio State, the biggest size team going into the tournament. Michigan, who had the Hobie Baker winner in Adam Fantilli and a ton of NHL caliber prospects as well. And then Minnesota with that stacked first line, tons of depth behind it, a great goaltender. To come back from 2-0 in that game when all hope seemed lost, make the necessary adjustments, force the walls to cave in on Minnesota defensively and attack on offense. Tremendous job by the Bobcats coaching staff.
They only trailed a couple of times during that run, beating Merrimack 5-0, beating Ohio State 4-1, facing adversity at every single step of the way, dominating Michigan in the semifinals, going down 2-0 to Minnesota, the number 1 team in the country, and coming all the way back, 3 unanswered, overtime winner, history made, storybook ending. It doesn't get much better if you're a Bobcat.
No, it doesn't. I guess the only way it could get better is if they were to repeat next year, which could potentially happen. We'll take a look at some of the transfer portal acquisitions that they've got in just a minute.
Yeah, looking into the future now, the Bobcats are coming into next season the reigning and defending national champions. First time ever, they have to defend the yard, so to speak. There's been a couple of transfers, a couple of new additions. How does this team get back to the promised land, make it to Minnesota next year in next year's Frozen Four, and win a second straight national title?
They've already started rebuilding their defense. They're going to lose Metza. They're going to lose Jacob Nordquist. They're going to lose Jake Johnson, all going into after their grad years. They'll be graduating. So they've gotten some acquisitions in the NCHC transfer portal. They added a defenseman from Omaha. They added another defenseman, a hometown kid in Connecticut from North Dakota. That's a start. But now I think you got to wonder is what will Skylar Brindamore leave? Mike Lombardi's definitely gone. Desi Burgard's probably gone as well, unless he takes a grad year. Same with Brindamore, unless he decides to stick around for a grad season. But you have a good top line in Lipkin, Graf, and Quillen. You start there, you work your way up, but the kid line and the Kristoff line with Chernetsky in there and Filion Italia, you could start there as well. You also have some forwards that could come in, some first years like Alex Power and Matthew Campbell on the back end. You've got some pieces there that you could put in. This will be kind of a young team, but the experience of that first line this season for Quinnipiac, the Graf, Quillen, and Lipkin line, that's where you start. You start rebuilding the defense in the transfer portal, and you still have Yaniv Peretz. Whether he leaves or not, you have a backbone in Chase Clark as well that's going to be an NHL caliber goaltender in the near future. So all those set up for what could be a prime opportunity of another run for Quinnipiac and another Whitelaw championship and another national championship as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting season coming up for the Quinnipiac Bobcats. The celebrations beginning here Sunday and Monday on the Quinnipiac campus. We're going to leave you with a bit of a look inside of a Bobcat return. Quinnipiac coming back from Tampa Bay today. We'll cut now to some footage as they are heading into M&T Bank Arena, celebrating with that national championship. That will do it for us here on the Q30 post-game report. Thank you so much for tuning in to all of our content throughout the entire weekend. It has been a blast covering the team back here in Hamden, seeing the celebration last night on the Mount Carmel campus, seeing all of our colleagues down in Tampa Bay, cutting highlights, writing articles, doing broadcasts. This is something that every single student media person has been able to contribute to, and we thank you so much for tuning in. Sports Pause is tomorrow at 9:30. We'll have even more coverage of the Men's Ice Hockey National Championship. Bobcat Breakdown newscast to follow here on Q30 Television as well. For David Marr, I'm Clever Streich. Have a good night.